So let's talk about inner join in Pandas. It's the intersection of two data frames, and the resultant is also a data frame. So here we have imported the Pandas package and the alias is PD. In the data frame 1, we have taken the dataset as car model dataset. In the data frame 2, we have taken the car theft dataset. Now let's call the function .head to see the first 5 rows. So that's the rows in the data frame 1. That's the first 5, gives a bit of clear idea about what kind of columns we have, what kind of data we have under those columns. So in the data frame 2 .head, there was a mistake. So now let's check the data in the data frame 2, and let's call the function .head. So as you can see in the data frame 2, we have those rows. Now let's do the inner join on the data frame 1 and data frame 2. So I'm merging data frame 2 to data frame 1 on the ID column. And now let's display the merged. So if we look at the first 5 rows, we can actually see that it has been merged. So this ID is column to both the data frames, which is there under the merged data frame. Now let's check how we can actually have the tailored suffixes. So you can see here model make model underscore x, make model underscore y. So we can actually customize those suffixes. It's because that's the column name which is available in both the data frames. So that's the Python's way to actually handle that. So we're going to here put the suffixes equal to, and then we're going to specify our suffixes. So yeah, I'm putting here table 1 and table 2. So it kind of tells you from which table actually those kind of columns are coming. And now let's display it. So as you can see, now it's displayed as make model table 1, make model table 2. Check the shape of our data frames. So in the data frame 1, we have 48 rows and 4 columns. Now let's check for data frame 2. And it also has 48 rows and 4 columns. Let's check for the merged one. And it has 48 rows and 7 columns. So now we are going to merge 3 data frames. In data frame 1 and 2, C column is common. And based on the combined result of 1 and 2, we are going to merge it with the data frame 3. So we will have E column common in that case. So I have already imported Pandas package as PD and have retrieved these 3 sample data. So now let's check what's there in the sample data. So in the data frame 1.head, as you can see, the 5 rows, the kind of data we have in ID, make, model, and the state. Similarly, in the data frame 2, we have different and kind of same IDs, and then you have model year and the state. So model is a bit of different information. In the data frame 3, we have the theft data along with the ID and the state. So now we're going to merge these 3 data frames. So it's data frame 1.merge data frame 2. So we are going to perform the inner join. So that's on the ID column. Then it's the backslash. And now we are going to merge the result of the 2 data frames with the third one. Again, it's going to be the inner join, and it's on the ID. So we are not specifying the how condition. So if we haven't specified it, by default it takes as the inner join. And in the merge dot head, as you can see, so these are our results set. Now let's try to merge another data frame. So let's see, how we can go on and combine the fourth data frame and so on. So I have already imported the data. So the process is going to be a bit similar. So we are going to combine all the result and merge it with the data frame 4. So that's the data frame 4. I have um, took the method dot head, and as you can see, there are 5 rows. So it's the ID, rank, and state. So we're going to merge it on the ID with the fourth data frame as well. So let's, as it is, let's merge the data frame 1, 2, and let's put the combined result with the data frame 3. And again backslash, and then you're going to merge the resultant data frame with the data frame 4. And again, we are going to specify here the ID column on which we are going to merge. So now let's check the result. Now let's try to play a little bit with the suffixes. So let's try to replace the underscore x and underscore y suffix, which has basically come from from left and right tables. If we think about the inner join. So here we're going to use another argument for the suffixes, and let's specify the name. So let's take table 1 and table 2. Here as well we can put table 1 and table 2, so it will give us an kind of idea from which table, left or right, the column has actually come. Now let's check the result. So these are the resultant rows. That's the number of rows and columns. Let's try to maybe rename it in a better way, because we have 4 data frames, and let's make it more clear from which data frame actually which column is coming. Okay, so now let's check how we can actually merge 2 data frames on multiple columns. So I have imported the 2 CSV files, car model and car model here. Now let's check what is the data in the 2 data frames by using head method. So you can see we have ID, make, model, state, and in the second one we have model year as well. So now let's merge the 2 data frames. So this time we are going to merge on the multiple columns. So in the on, we are going to pass the list of the columns on which we are going to merge the 2 data frames. So it's ID and make model. Here we are taking, so when the corresponding 2 values match, only then the join will be performed. And now let's specify the suffixes as well. Otherwise default it takes underscore x and underscore y. So that's how, that's the result. So the left join contains all the rows from the left table. That's including the intersecting rows. The number of rows should be the same as that of the left table after the left join. The output of one-to-many merge with the left join will have a greater than or equal rows than that of the left table. So here we have imported the pandas package. Um, we have imported the CSV files. Now let's check first what's there in our imported files. So as you can see in data frame 1, we have same kind of data. In the second one, we have model year as well. So I've made example on the same kind of data in the previous videos as well, so you can relate and see the differences. So for the left join, we are going to specify here another argument, that's how, and we are going to specify it as left. For the inner join, we have specified how equal to inner, or we can leave it and the default is inner join. So here we have specifically specified left, and these are resultant rows. So now let's check the original number of columns and rows in our original data frames and what we have got after the left join in the resultant data set. So let's check for the data frame 1. As you can see, we have 50 rows and 3 columns. For the data frame 2, it's 46 rows and 2 columns. And after performing left join, which has to be, so it's one too many. So we have 50 rows, which is equal to what we have in data frame 1 and 4 columns. So in the right join, we have all the data rows from the data frame 2, including the intersecting rows. Usually the number of rows in the resultant data frame is the number of rows what we have in the right table. So here we have imported pandas package as PD. We have imported the two CSV files. Now let's first look what the data in our two CSV files is. So that how it looks in the data frame 1. Now let's check in the data frame 2. And that's the data we have in the data frame 2. So now let's try to perform the right join. So let's take data frame 1 dot merge with data frame 2 on the ID column. You can have multiple columns as well if you want. How? And that's the right we have passed. So that's the resultant data after performing the right join. So here, what we have actually seen in earlier videos is we had the same column name to merge on in both the data frames. But what if we have different column names and we have to merge on that column? So we have ID column here under the car model, and in the next data frame we can see we have UID instead of ID. So how we are going to merge on these two? How we are going to merge these two data frames? So let's try to merge. So data frame 1 dot merge with data frame 2. So here now we are not going to specify on because we don't have the same column name. Instead, let's specify left on the ID or UID. And so we have in the left we have ID and on the right table data frame 2 we have UID. So by default it's going to perform the inner join as we haven't specified the how argument here. So that's the resultant set we have got. Now let's check for the right join and the left join when we have different column name in both the data frames. So let's first look at the left join. So we're going to specify here an additional argument as left. And as you can see, it's left on the ID, and on the right on it's the UID. Now let's check the right join. So we are just going to copy that line and change the how argument to right. So that's our resultant data set. So in the outer join, the rows from the two data frames, including the intersecting rows, are included. Here we are specifically talking about the full outer join. Earlier we have seen the examples of left full outer join and right full outer join. So now let's first check what kind of data we have in the two data frames. So let's just take sample of 5 rows and see. So we in the second one we just have an additional add-on data regarding the model year and the state apart from the ID. So now let's merge data frame 1 with the 2 as the full outer join. So we have specified the left column on which we are going to merge, that's the ID. The right column, let's take the UID. And let's specify the how argument as outer. Let's add suffixes as well, because we have state column common in both the data frames. So just to know from which what state is coming from the left table and what state is coming from the right table. So now let's check the resultant set, and that's how our resultant sets look like. So here I have imported the file. Now let's check how our data looks like. Now let's merge it to itself. So earlier what we were doing, data frame 1 dot merge data frame 2. Now as we are going to merge into itself, so we are going to specify data frame 1. And the left column we are going to specify here as ID, and the right one we want to specify here as release ID. So whenever there's a match on ID and release ID, we want to have a join and get the corresponding row. And this for suffixes also we can specify. So what kind of data is coming, what we have assumed as the left one and from the right one. Now let's check the result. It will be a bit more clear. So here, as you can see, first two rows are not a null, right? So we have null values here because we don't have 101 or 102 release ID. So we have release ID for 103, 4 and 5. It could find a match, and you can see it has taken rows from the right table, which is itself. Just to make it more clear, if I have performed the inner join here, you can see only those rows are displayed which had the matching release ID to that of ID. So now here, as you can see, we have already mentioned the index column. In the data frame 1 it's the ID, and in the data frame 2 it's the MID. So now let's check date in the data frame 1. As you can see, ID column has been set as the index column. Now let's check the data frame 2. Here MID is the index column, Now we are going to perform the merge on the index column. So now let's merge the data frame 1 with the data frame 2. Let's specify the left on as the ID. So that's the index column from the left table, and set the left index as true because we are choosing the index. Let's specify the column from the right table. That's the MID. Let's specify right index as true. And in the how argument, let's specify as left. So we are going to perform here the left join. Now let's see the resultant rows. So as you can see, as this was the left join, so we have performed the join on the ID and the MID. So as it is left join, that's why you can see the ID index here. So here in the index column, we have ID, rank, the MID and the rank in the data frame 2 now as the index column. Let's just check the data first in 2 data frames. So as you can see, in the first one we have ID and rank as the index columns, and in the second one MID and rank as the index column in the data frame 2. Now let's try to merge on the multi-index data frame 1 dot merge with the data frame 2. So we're going to specify here as left on because we have different names, combination of different names in 2 data frames. So in the left one it's ID and the rank. In the right one, so let's put the left index as true as they are the index columns, and on the right one let's specify MID and the rank. And let's specify the right index as set to true, and you can specify the how argument. If you leave it, then by default it's an inner join. So let's try to perform a left join and see how it actually looks. So should we capital T here? So that's how our resultant rows look like. So we are going to see here how we can merge on the multi-index. In the data frame 1, we have ID and rank indexes, and then the data frame 2, we have MID and rank indexes. Now, so there are various ways to handle this. Let's first try to rename the index in the data frame 2 so that it matches with the name as that in data frame 1. We are going to see in the later video how we can handle if we have different names, but just for the sake of this one, let's keep the name same. So we have transformed the name from MID to ID, and as the names are same of the index in both the data frames, so now let's perform the merge. So data frame 1 dot merge with the data frame 2. In the on, we are going to specify the list of 2 columns. So that's the ID and the rank, as it is same on in both the data frames. So we are not specifying here left on and the right on. In the how argument, we has passed as the left. So that's how the resultant data looks like. So that gives a kind of better idea how it's going to perform join on the multi-index. So I have already imported Pandas package as PT. Now let's see how we can actually concatenate two data frames. So let's first prepare a data frame. Let's call it maybe group 1. So these are the columns that I'm creating. So first we are going to create a dictionary, and we have value and the keys. And after that we are going to create data frame out of this thing. Let's take name as car A, B, C just for the simplicity, so that we are comfortable in interpreting the result. Now let's create the data frame. Let's pass the dictionary. Now let's create another group 2. Let's give ID maybe a bit different from what we already have, so we can actually see how the vertical concatenation actually looks like. Let's take name as car F, car G, and H. Let's again create data frame out of this dictionary. So now we let's see what we have in two data frames. Okay, so it's created perfectly. Now let's try to actually concatenate these two data frames vertically. Let's name it as concatenated data frame, and let's call pd.concat and pass the two data frames here. So this is the list of data frames that we are actually passing. Now let's check the result. So as you can see, the two data frames are vertically connected, so they're concatenated vertically. Now as you can see, the problem with the above result is the index is not continuous. So to have the continuous index, we are going to pass an argument here. So let's just copy the above line, and let's pass the argument as ignore index equal to true. By default it is false, that's why the index was not continuous. So now let's again check the result, and as you can see, now the index is continuous. So let's validate the merge. So we are basically here going to check whether one to one, one to many, many to many, many to one. Um, so we're not going to see all the cases, but let's just check for one that after the merge whether we can validate it or not. I'm creating here frame or one. So let's define the dictionary which has key value pair here. Then we are going to convert it into data frame. So let's take ID category for the simplicity. Let's define frame 2 as well so that we have another data frame to compare. Let's define the categories here. Let's take AABB just to keep things simple. Now let's convert them into data frame. Now let's convert the frame 2 as well into data frame. And now let's check what kind of data we have in the data frames. So let's define data frame 1 as you can see. So the data is there in the data frame 2 as well. We have successfully created our data frames. Now let's try to merge them. So data frame 1 dot merge data frame true, and we can merge it on the ID. That's the that's common as well in both the data frames. Now let's try to validate it as one to one. This should give some kind of error or warning. Now shift plus tab, and as you can see, so there's this a detailed description of what are the arguments and what they actually does. So you have one to one, many, many to one, many to many. You can validate on any of these. So as we did, so we got the error: merge keys are not unique in right data set, not a one-to-one merge. So we can actually see in the data frame 2, right? We have duplicate IDs, one AA, one BB. So if we are trying to merge it on the ID, it's not so on one to many you can actually see how the result looks like.